Hey everyone! Today I want to talk about No Country for Old Men from 2007 by Joel and Ethan Coen. This is the 43rd episode of my 1000 Favorite Movie series, where I talk about the movies I love the most in a random order. I suppose I'm mixed on the Coen brothers overall. Out of the ones I've seen, I actively dislike about as many as the ones I like, but I really love those that I like. And in fact, if God willing I'm able to complete the series, this is nowhere near the last video about them you'll see. But I must confess off the bat that out of all those movies, No Country for Old Men is probably the one I have the least affection for. I suppose the biggest reason for this is that it's their darkest and I'd imagine their most cynical movie. A movie that offers practically no hope and a lot of challenge. It's kind of amazing that it's become arguably their most popular movie. But on the surface, I can see why it has the following it does. It's a very suspenseful, atmospheric thriller with a great villain, maybe the most iconic of the century so far. It's about three different men and how their paths kind of intersect. First, there's Llewellyn Moss, played by Josh Brolin, an ordinary man who stumbles upon a drug deal gone wrong and a briefcase with $2 million inside. He soon finds himself being chased by Anton Chigurh, played by Javier Bardem, a ruthless serial killer who's after the money and will stop at nothing to get it. Both of these men are being chased by Ed Tom Bell, played by Tommy Lee Jones, an old timer sheriff who is close to retirement. The majority of the film more or less plays like a cat and mouse chase film, with Jigger chasing Moss around Texas, mostly Texas hotels and motels to be exact. And it's really engaging to watch and satisfies our genre expectations. But eventually, the focus of the film starts to shift to Bell, and slowly but surely, our genre expectations start to be dashed as the film starts to feel less and less conventional. And to be honest, it's when this happens that the movie really becomes memorable to me and kind of elevates it in my eyes. That's not to say that the more conventional bulk of the movie isn't expertly done, because it absolutely is. And the overwhelming reason for why this is the villain Chigurh, as portrayed by Javier Bardem. The movie wastes no time to show us just how scary he is, being that the first shot we see of him from the front is his face shrouded in darkness. Heck, this is the first time we can clearly see his face. Yikes. And this isn't his only frightening face, because even though he's expressionless much of the time, he can suddenly turn very scary on a dime. He's a cold terror throughout, armed with a gas tank and a silent shotgun. Basically, consider yourself very lucky if you meet him and he doesn't kill you. Combined with his strange hairdo and nightmarish voice, the Coens never for a minute make him in any way sympathetic or relatable. If they wanted him to embody pure evil, then I must say they succeeded. Because he's such a threat, the movie works brilliantly as a suspense thriller. Even though I don't really care about Moss as a character too much, we root for him simply because of what he's up against. Thankfully, he's smart and resourceful, so it's at least a fair fight. For example, having the foresight and skill to handle the first motel situation is very impressive, sticking the briefcase all the way in the back of the air duct, making it seem impossible to get back out again, yet being able to get it back from another room. It's fun to see them match wits, especially in the second hotel sequence, which is easily the most suspenseful scene in the movie. This is accomplished mostly through the sound design and cinematography, in other words, pure filmmaking. The hotel is so deathly quiet that when Moss calls reception, you can actually hear the phone ringing all the way downstairs. And of course, once we see someone standing outside the door through the crack underneath, and once we get a close up of the doorknob, everyone knows what's coming, but it frightens us anyway. What's also great about this sequence and how it continues is that we almost never see the killer, only the damage from the gunshots. We become so engaged in the genre elements that the moments when the movie starts subverting our expectations really leave an impact. I'll try my best not to spoil the movie from here on out to save the impact for those who haven't seen it. I think my first indication of this subversion is what happens with Carson Wells, played by Woody Harrelson. He's introduced as a kind of bounty hunter who is very familiar with Sugar and gives some information about him. Since he's known him for so long, you'd think he'd be pretty helpful and have more of a role in the story, but it turns out he doesn't. One of the basic movie expectations is that if there's a star like Woody Harrelson in it, they'll always end up being important in some way. But let's just say that the movie throws that out the window in a rather unglamorous fashion. There's also a brief and sudden scene at a motel that comes as a huge shock that kind of changes everything, completely altering the direction of the film for good. Especially the fact that this happens off screen is a total far cry from most movies you've ever seen. And speaking of off screen, I think that this element is the thing that helped put this movie over the top for me to be included on my top 1000 list. After about the halfway mark, we really only see one on screen kill, as opposed to the 8 by my count in the first half. But make no mistake, the kill count is still comparable in the second half, but they're either implied, being off screen entirely, or out of frame. In some cases, it's left ambiguous enough for the viewer to decide for themselves what happened. One might expect the second half to have more violent set pieces than the first, but by so defiantly reversing this, the movie becomes almost more mature and respectful of the audience's intelligence, as we don't need to see the kill for it to have an impact on us. In fact, I'd argue that not seeing it has a much greater impact. Case in point, the only on screen kill that happens in the second half is this one, where Shiger bursts into this office and kills a very minor character. This kill is violent and brutal, but there's another man in the same room as this happens. He's obviously shocked. He asks, "Are you going to shoot me?" Shiger turns around and says, "That depends. Do you see me?" We cut to this wide shot, and then to the next scene. To me, this implies that he shoots him, but considering he said that it depends, we could interpret it either way, I think. But even so, this ambiguous kill has 100 times the impact as the one we did see. If anything, this teaches us that what we see disgusts and shocks us, while what we don't see haunts us, at least in the case of this movie. The haunting nature of the second half is part of what makes this movie dark, but what makes it so dark is put into perspective by Bell, the sheriff. He gives a powerful opening monologue that sets the tone of the movie, where it talks about a boy he once put on the electric chair who killed a girl for no reason, only because he wanted to kill, and wanted to do it yet again. He expresses in his monologue that there's pure evil in the world that no one can understand, and we basically just have to deal with it if we're to live in this world. This evil would quickly come to be represented by Shiger, and his lack of any human compassion whatsoever fits the bill perfectly. Even the few lucky people he does spare, and we only definitively see one of them in the film, he spares simply by a coin flip. Pure luck, no human thoughts or emotions. Bell represents the law and the potential of justice to be carried out, but he's always one step behind of evil, and is always too late to effect any change. The movie thus makes evil seem to be an inevitable, ruthless fact of life, letting us live only through luck, which is why I said earlier that this is probably the Coen's most cynical movie. It's a vision, to be sure, and this vision is masterfully executed, but whether it's a point of view that should be embraced or not is up to you. I personally have no problem with dark, hopeless visions in art, even if I don't accept them as my own outlook on life, so that's that. However, if I have a problem with the movie, it would be its other theme of tying this evil to the modern world. Going back to the opening monologue, Bell points out that sheriffs didn't even wear guns back in the day, contrasting it to now where they obviously have to. There are many lines delivered by Bell and his other old timer associates complaining about the modern world and how things are more violent nowadays than they ever were. But aside from the monologue at the beginning, the movie never convinced me that this is a new problem, and that old men are more susceptible now than ever. And indeed, another old timer at the end proves my point that this isn't a new problem. But even so, I guess my main issue with all these ruminations about old age and the modern world is that they seem much more written on the page than cinematically expressed, not really integrated into the narrative like the theme about evil is, so as to make it come off more like a writer's conceit than an integrated theme that the audience feels. But this is just my feeling. I'm always open to the possibility that I'm missing something. But back to the positives. The sound design and cinematography are also gorgeous throughout. I love how quiet and moody the film is, employing very little music and a very subtle tension during the tense moments. Roger Deakins also does his part to raise your hair, using shadows in particular to create some haunting shots, my favorite of which are these that you're looking at now. Although I must say that this technical beauty can feel a bit cold, which of course was their purpose, but it contributes to a distancing that's a little unusual for the Coens. The truth is, I miss some of the warmth and humor that's often found in their films. And while we get a little comedy here and there, it's almost like they're scared to emphasize it, as if it would dangerously undercut a more rarefied air. For example, when Moss is renting a second motel room without caring about what kind of room, the receptionist exclaims, "It's got two double beds." And literally the millisecond she finishes speaking, we cut to the next shot, where his preparing for retrieving the briefcase will commence. What she says and how she says it are funny, but the cut is so instantaneous that we're not sure if we're supposed to laugh or not. Another such example is later, when Moss stumbles into a clothing store in his hospital gown. He asks the staff, "You have a lot of people come in here without any clothes on?" And the staff replies, "No, sir, it's unusual." And again, they cut right away to the next scene. This undercutting of the comedy that is here means that the Coens are able to keep the tension high throughout the film, so this of course shouldn't be taken as a flaw. I guess I'm just trying to express why, as great as this movie is, I have less personal affection for this more serious, Oscar bound movie than some of my other favorite Coen movies. But now let me talk about my favorite moments. I've already talked about some candidates for my favorite scenes, like the hotel showdown and the ambiguous office kill, so I'll go to some other moments. First, here's a tense scene of someone who bravely survives Shigurd. He goes into the office of the trailer park where Moss lives, and he asks the receptionist where he is. He keeps asking her where he works more aggressively, and she gets annoyed with him and sternly tells him that she can't say. You think that it's going to escalate and wonder what he's going to do, but then he hears a toilet flushing and decides to leave, while we see her standing her ground. Little does she know what she nearly just avoided. But almost ironically, this character is the most defiant to the psychopath's face out of everyone, and I love to see it. Another tense moment without any violence is when Shigeru locates a briefcase with the bleeper. It's a small moment, but I love when he slowly drives past the room to figure out which one it is. He drives without his lights on to avoid suspicion, and we know it's in store for whoever's inside. Finally, there's the ending. Without saying what happens, this is the location and the characters, Bill talking to his wife. This isn't one of my favorite scenes for the scene itself, but for the fact that this is the ending. It ends so abruptly that I was simply befuddled when I first watched it, which was around the time it came out on DVD. And I would have loved to have been in an audience of people seeing it for the first time at a theater. I often love it when a movie structure goes against audiences' expectations, so I wonder how most people felt. As for me, an unconventional whimper of an ending like this really made me want to look at the movie again and closely pay attention to try and understand the significance of what he was saying. And I find that movies that do this often have more staying power, which this has in spades. So, in the end, what I love about No Country for Old Men is that while it starts as a gripping thriller slash chase film, it gradually morphs into something totally unexpected and powerful, where what's kept off screen is even more disturbing than what was previously on screen. Anchored by Javier Bardem's brilliant performance as a ruthless monster, evil personified, this is an experience that certainly stays with you. It's not my favorite Coen Brothers film, but it's still one of my 1000 favorite movies. Thanks for watching my video. Goshoujo makoto ni arigatou gozaimasu. Have you seen No Country for Old Men? Let me know what you think in the comments. I think of all my favorite movies as my friends, and I think of my audience as friends too. Remember, I upload a new video every Friday, so if you want to help me complete my 1000 favorite movies epic, don't forget to like and subscribe.